Well, now you've got the UAW strike impacting 2,000 employees at the Fairfax plant, the GM Fairfax plant on the Kansas side of the state line. And what is the end to any of this? How does it end? When does it end? There's no end in sight. And, you look at the fact that Joe Biden's labor policies have emboldened union bosses at the expense of individual workers. So I wanted to get the insights on that from Austen Bannan. He is with Americans for Prosperity. He joins us on KCMO. Austin, thanks for being here in Kansas City. Take me through how Joe Biden's labor policies have emboldened these union bosses like Shawn Fain.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. What I'll first also point out is we've seen a number of strikes around the country, strikes we haven't seen in a while. There's been port strikes, Hollywood strikes. The railway industry has been under threat of strike. So this isn't a new thing. And as we're saying here, it's all related. President Biden calls himself the most pro-union president in American history, and he's really backed up his talk in this regards. Right now, we're dealing with a slew of regulations that are out to favor unions and that are out to undermine worker choice for individual workers. I'd be happy to go over a number of those. It starts with his prioritization of the PRO Act. He wants to take away independent contracting for workers who want to go out into self-employment and be entrepreneurs by instituting a California-style policy, and we're waiting for that to occur. But his National Labor Relations Board has already done that, and the biggest reason is because it creates opportunities to unionize more workers. You can unionize independent workers, but you can unionize full-time employees. There's a new overtime rule that's going to take away flexibility in professional workplaces. This is a way to basically take away the opportunity for someone to work more hours one week and then take time off in the future and have flexibility in the schedules by saying that anyone who makes under $55,000 a year is going to be hit now with overtime costs, even if they wanted more flexibility. There's new prevailing wage increase where every construction project in America is going to have increased inflation because the Biden Department of Labor wants the costs to be calculated on wide regional standards, where large cities like New York City and Chicago, the cost of construction there are going to be applied to rural areas, and they're going to go to union labor specifically. They're also in the process of taking away secret ballot elections for workers. There's a new CMEX construction decision at the National Labor Relations Board. When a union calls to be recognized, if a business still wants to seek a secret ballot before it's recognized, if there's any unfair labor practice lobbed against that business, and these are subjective, by the way, but if the National Labor Relations Board thinks there's any technicality, workers lose the chance to vote for that union. So regardless of whether the business was right or wrong, workers were the ones who were left out. And
Wow.
This is just a continual process.
So Austen Bannan is joining us, Americans for Prosperity. That's a lot there to digest. That's interesting. And is all this happening just through essentially executive action with the Labor Relations Board? Is that where this is all taking place and originating?
It's both the National Labor Relations Board, and they can do it through cases. Essentially, whenever there's some sort of dispute at a workplace, they can create a case to make a decision, and then they just unilaterally make decisions. Some of it's through rules that they've put forward, but also the Department of Labor. There's an acting secretary. President Biden thinks she's, I guess, the official secretary, Julie Su, who hasn't been nominated, but her agency is pushing a lot through Department of Labor as well. But all of this is essentially an attempt to enact the PRO Act. Since they can't get it through Congress, they're trying to do it through as many rules and regulations as they can. And this is why unions are emboldened, as you were mentioning at the start of the segment. The unions feel like they have a president that protects them, and they feel like all the actions from the NLRB means they're going to help them get the outcome they're looking for if they act boldly, more so than they would have at any point in the past.
And the PRO Act it prohibits employers from permanently replacing striking workers, right? I mean, that's a large part of the PRO Act.
That's one part of it. It takes away the right to work privileges across the states. So workers in the 26 right to work states, they don't have to pay a union just to be employed. That was taken away in Michigan, by the way, which is of course a central place of concern with the UAW strikes. And it takes away, and the PRO Act actually takes away information privacy. Businesses have to hand over your personal email address, home address, and phone numbers to unions who can then go out and pressure you to sign cards of your interest in a union. And now with the new National Labor Relations Board representation changes that I was talking about, taking away secret ballot, that little signature you give may actually be your yes vote for a union when you never intended it to be.
Wow. That's unbelievable. All right, so this UAW strike, I said before you joined us that I think the administration's going to try to play a role here in ending this and look like the heroes in this for political purposes. How do you see them potentially playing a role, if at all, in the ending of this UAW strike?
Yeah, so one of the interesting parts that you and others may have seen some around is that there's a debate around electric vehicle mandates and subsidies. This came from the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. Of course, it's actually creating more bite inflation. But that process, the unions were somewhat upset because the subsidies weren't directly going towards the unions themselves. So I think they're looking for a cut of it, and that's a little bit of their protest. Their demands are outlandish. They want 32-hour work weeks. They want 40% pay raises. They want to return to traditional pensions rather than 401ks for a lot of workers, which can really kind of put you in a bind when you go through difficult economic times. So I think part of it is maybe a debate around whether there can be some sort of aid to the unions to reassure them that all of this Biden spending will benefit them rather than go to the non-auto union plants or investment in electric vehicle manufacturing parts and processes that come from China. So that's where part of the debate is. And some conservatives are pointing that out. But I think the unions were going to be outrageous regardless because they've been doing that throughout the entire Biden administration. But I think that's one of the real sticking points that some of this might be resolved through.
Okay. All right. And then so you think ultimately they'll play a role. So we'll be watching, we'll be following. And Austen, we appreciate you hopping on here in Kansas City on KCMO. Thanks so much.
Yes, thank you.
All right. That's Austen Bannan. He is with Americans for Prosperity.